the Millionaire announced the cruelest challenge the world had ever seen. 10 beautiful women fought for love, power, and fortune. But no one expected him to fall for the beggar. One look from her was enough to shatter his pride and change the ending. What do you think will happen in this story? Comment and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear. In London, a city of stark contrasts between mirrored skyscrapers and forgotten communities, the announcement struck like lightning out of a clear sky. Thomas Miller, the enigmatic founder of Tech Global and one of the country's wealthiest men, would be announcing a live-streamed social experiment. At 42, owner of a fortune estimated in billions and known for his almost pathological reclusiveness, Thomas declared in an official statement that he would choose his future wife through a television program. Not a common reality show, but a social experiment where 10 women would live with him for 3 months at his mansion, Grandview Estate, in the English countryside. "I'm tired of empty relationships based solely on my wealth," he declared. In a rare interview with Insight magazine, "I want to find someone who sees beyond the businessman, beyond the bank account, and I want Britain to witness this process." The news caused a national frenzy. Broadcasters vied for transmission rights, while celebrities and digital influencers moved heaven and earth to secure a place among the 10 finalists. After fierce competition, Star TV, the third largest broadcaster in the country, acquired the transmission rights for an undisclosed sum, which experts estimated to be in the 9 digits. "This will be the biggest television event of the decade," announced Roger Martin, the network's programming director, at a press conference. An unprecedented social experiment blending romance, psychology, and entertainment. The selection process was as controversial as it was spectacular. More than 20,000 women applied in the first 48 hours. After 3 months of screenings, interviews, and psychological tests, 10 finalists were chosen: 3 digital influencers, 2 businesswomen, a lawyer, a doctor, an international model, an award-winning chef, and a psychologist. Miller's 10, as the press dubbed them, represented what British society considered the female elite: independent, successful, articulate women who were inevitably within conventional beauty standards. Their faces graced magazines, television programs, and billboards across the country weeks before the official premiere. The production rented the luxurious Pinnacle Hotel in London for the official presentation of the candidates. The event would be broadcast live during prime time, with special coverage from national and international press. The country's largest sponsors invested fortunes to link their brands to the program, which was already simply called The Chosen One. On the night of the presentation, Commander Lewis Avenue was closed to accommodate the crowd and dozens of press vehicles. A 200-meter red carpet led the guests to the hotel's main ballroom, where Thomas Miller, wearing a custom-made Italian suit, waited seated on a modern throne, specially designed for the event. The candidates arrived one by one, each entrance carefully choreographed to maximize visual and emotional impact. Patricia Vance, 32, an influencer with over 15 million followers, arrived in a vintage Rolls-Royce. Louisa Mason, 29, a dermatologist and heiress to a hospital chain, descended from a helicopter on the hotel's helipad. Amanda Fisher, 34, a former international model and current cosmetics entrepreneur, appeared escorted by 4 dancers from the Grand Opera House. Each arrival was more spectacular than the last. The public watched mesmerized, while commentators dissected every detail: the dresses, the jewelry, the musical choices accompanying each entry. Thomas remained impassive, with a slight, polite smile that revealed no emotion. When the 9th candidate, Daniel Reed, an internationally acclaimed chef, made her triumphant entrance, the production began preparations for the grand finale. The presentation of Felicity Taylor, 35, a psychologist specializing in relationships, and a columnist for one of the country's largest women's magazines. It was at that moment that the unexpected happened. A thin woman, approximately 40 years old, with disheveled brown hair and simple, worn clothes, broke through the security cordon and entered the red carpet. As security guards rushed towards her, she walked with surprising calm to the center of the ballroom, stopping a few feet from Thomas Miller. The silence was instantaneous and absolute. Cameras, programmed to capture every second of the event, turned to the intruder. The security guards hesitated, awaiting instructions from the producers, who in turn seemed paralyzed by surprise. "My name is Caroline Lane," the woman said with a clear, firm voice, looking directly at Thomas. "I've lived on the streets for 4 years. I haven't come for your money or your name. I came because I want an opportunity to be seen as a human being, not as a number or a statistic." A murmur ran through the ballroom. Several people began filming with their cell phones. The producers, finally reacting, signaled for the security guards to remove her. "How did you get in here?" asked Roger Martin, the programming director, approaching visibly irritated. "I worked as a waitress at events here before I lost everything," Caroline replied simply. "I know the service entrances." Before the security guards could reach her, Thomas Miller stood up. It was his first movement since the beginning of the event. Everyone fell silent again. "Let her stay," he said in a calm voice that brooked no argument. "This is absurd," protested Amanda Fisher, the former model. "This wasn't in the contract." "Indeed," Thomas replied, looking directly at Caroline. "It's the first unscripted thing tonight." Roger Martin approached Thomas, speaking quietly but urgently. "Thomas, this goes against everything we planned. We have contracts, sponsors, expectations, and we have a unique opportunity," Thomas interrupted. "If this truly is a social experiment, as we've advertised, then I've just found the most interesting variable." He turned to the cameras. "Ladies and gentlemen, meet the 11th participant of The Chosen One, Caroline Lane." The 9 official candidates exchanged glances, a mix of shock and indignation. Patricia Vance, the influencer, gave a disdainful little laugh. This must be a joke. Caroline remained still, her calm gaze contrasting with the chaos around her. "Why do you want to participate in this?" Thomas asked, approaching her. "I don't want your money or your marriage," Caroline replied. "I want to show that people like me exist, that we are more than what we wear or where we sleep." One of the producers tried to intervene. "Thomas, we need to follow the script. We can't just—" "It's my show, my money, and my life," Thomas interrupted firmly. "Caroline is the 11th participant. End of discussion." The sponsors and network executives gathered in a corner, discussing heatedly. Social media was already exploding with videos of the moment, hashtags being created in real time. The intruder, Caroline Lane, The Chosen One controversy. "This will ruin everything," whispered Louisa Mason, the doctor, to Danielle Reed, the chef. "Or it will boost ratings," Danielle replied pragmatically. As confusion set in, Thomas Miller remained by Caroline's side, as if protecting her from collective judgment. For the first time that night, his smile seemed genuine. "You just turned the game upside down," he said in a low voice, for her alone to hear. "I'm not here to play," Caroline replied. "I'm here to exist." At that moment, as cameras tried to capture every angle of the unusual scene, something indefinable passed between the two. It wasn't physical attraction or romantic interest, but a mutual recognition, as if two people wearing different social masks finally saw each other for real. The first night of The Chosen One ended very differently than planned. Backstage, producers and network executives furiously debated how to proceed. On social media, the public was divided between supporting Caroline's audacity or condemning her for spoiling the event. Thomas Miller, for his part, announced that he would not change the original plans. All 11 women, the 10 selected, and Caroline, would go to his mansion at Grandview Estate the next day. The social experiment would officially begin, but now with a new variable that no one had predicted. That night, while the other contestants were accommodated in luxurious suites at the Pinnacle Hotel, Carolyn refused special accommodations. "I'll sleep where I always sleep," she said, leaving the hotel under curious and disdainful gazes. Only Thomas knew he had instructed his team to follow her discreetly, ensuring her safety without violating her dignity. The next day, all 11 women would board helicopters bound for Grandview Estate. All of Britain would be watching, and no one, not even Thomas Miller, could predict what would happen next. Thomas Miller's mansion at Grandview Estate was an architectural masterpiece, 6,000 square meters spread over 3 floors, with glass walls that opened onto the gardens and the infinity pool. The property, valued at over £100 million, had been transformed to accommodate the reality show with cameras installed in all common areas and a team of over 50 people working behind the scenes. The candidate's arrival was broadcast live during prime time, complete with commentators and behavioral specialists analyzing every detail. Helicopters landed one after another on the private helipad, providing moments of pure spectacle. Caroline was the last to arrive. Unlike the others who disembarked in elaborate outfits and impeccable makeup, she wore the same simple clothes from the previous night, now complemented by a worn canvas bag, her only luggage. "What did you bring in that bag?" asked Patricia Vance, the influencer, with a malicious smile, as they all gathered in the main living room for initial instructions. "Everything I need," Caroline replied calmly. Before Patricia could retort, Thomas entered the room, followed by a production team and Mary Stone, the presenter who would host the program. Tall, elegant, and known for her sharp wit, Mary was the perfect choice to lead a show that promised both glamour and conflict. "Welcome to your new home," Thomas announced. "For the next 3 months, we will live together in this space, participating in activities that will help us truly get to know each other." Mary then took over, explaining the program's format. There would be weekly challenges, daily tasks, and sessions with psychologists and therapists. Nothing would be eliminatory. All would remain until the end, when Thomas would make his choice. "The challenges are not competitions against each other," Thomas explained. "They are opportunities for me to get to know different facets of each of you." The first challenge would be the next day, a charity dinner to raise funds for institutions supporting vulnerable children. Each participant would have to present a social project and convince the guests, business leaders, and celebrities to make donations. "You will have 24 hours to prepare your presentation," Mary concluded. "Your room is ready." "Room?" questioned Felicity Taylor, the psychologist. "Singular?" "Exactly," Mary confirmed with a mischievous smile. "You will all share the same space. It's part of the social experiment." The news was met with thinly veiled expressions of displeasure. The room, though spacious and luxurious, with 11 beds and a stunning view of the property's artificial lake, meant zero privacy, exactly what the producers wanted. "And where is your room, Thomas?" asked Amanda Fisher, the former model, with a suggestive smile. "Upstairs," he replied politely, not reciprocating the insinuation. "You will only be invited there when I wish to speak with one of you individually." The following hours were spent adapting. The women chose their beds, all instinctively moving away from Carolyn, who got the one furthest from the door and began unpacking. The contrast was stark. While most had brought several designer suitcases with carefully selected clothes and accessories, Carolyn pulled only a few basic items, a battered notebook, and a small book from her canvas bag. "What's that?" asked Sophia Aldridge, the lawyer, pointing to the book, more out of curiosity than provocation. "Blindness by Saramago," Caroline replied. "It helps me remember that true blindness is not physical." Sophia nodded, a little disconcerted by the answer. Preparation for the charity dinner began immediately. Each woman isolated herself in a corner of the mansion to plan her presentation. Some, like Patricia and Amanda, already had social projects linked to their public images and only needed to adapt existing presentations. Others, like Louisa, the doctor, and Danielle, the chef, had clear ideas based on their areas of expertise. Carolyn, meanwhile, sat alone on the house edge of the lake, writing in her notebook. Some cameras followed her, capturing her solitary image against the sunset, an image that would later become iconic on social media. Meanwhile, backstage, Roger Martin, the network director, argued heatedly with the production team. "We need to make sure she doesn't steal the show," he said, referring to Caroline. "The public wants glamour, drama, romance, not a moral lesson." "But social media is loving her," countered one of the producers. "The hashtags about Caroline have already surpassed all others. People are curious." "Curiosity doesn't sustain ratings for 3 months," Roger retorted. "We need conflict, passion, intrigue." It was then decided that during the charity dinner, Caroline would be placed at a disadvantage. She would be the last to present, when guests were already tired and less inclined to donate. The night of the dinner arrived, bringing the cream of London society to the mansion. Business leaders, politicians, celebrities, all impeccably dressed and eager to be part of the television event of the moment. The presentations began. Patricia Vance spoke about her project to promote sports in underprivileged communities, showing a professionally produced and moving video. Amanda Fisher presented her foundation supporting women victims of domestic violence. Louisa Mason proposed a program of free medical care in remote areas of Britain. Each presentation was impeccable, engaging, and clearly prepared in advance. Guests applauded and made generous donations, while Thomas observed everything from his seat at the main table, occasionally asking pertinent questions that demonstrated his genuine interest in the causes. When it was Caroline's turn, as planned, most guests had already made their donations and were chatting distractedly, wearing the only dress she had brought, simple but clean and dignified. She walked to the center of the room. Without a digital presentation, without a video, without a support team, Caroline began to speak. Her voice, initially low, gained firmness as she told her story. 6 years ago, I ran an organization that worked with homeless youth in East London. We weren't a big NGO, we didn't have famous sponsors, but we made a difference. We offered not just shelter and food, but dignity and perspective. The murmur in the room subsided. People began to pay attention. One day I discovered that my partner and my accountant had embezzled almost all of our reserve fund. When I reported it, I was accused of being responsible. I lost everything. The organization I built, my reputation, my friends. Depression came next, and with it, the impossibility of rebuilding my life. The silence was now complete. Even the cameras seemed to move more carefully. I'm not here asking for pity, nor money. What I propose is not to create a new organization, but to revitalize small initiatives that already exist and do grassroots work in communities. Initiatives that don't have marketing, that don't appear at gala events, but that are on the front lines, dealing with the raw reality of our inequalities. Caroline then pulled some folded sheets of paper from her pocket. Here are 10 organizations I know personally that do grassroots work in different communities in London. I don't ask you to donate to me, but directly to them. And I don't just ask for money, but time, your presence, your attention. She paused for a moment, looking directly at the main camera. Because true poverty is not the lack of money, but the lack of visibility. The room remained silent for a few seconds after she finished. Then, slowly, one of the business leaders stood up and walked over. To her, "I want to know about these organizations," he said, taking one of the sheets. "All of them." Others followed suit. In minutes, all the sheets had been distributed, and guests formed a circle around Caroline, asking questions, offering cards, making connections. From his seat at the main table, Thomas observed the scene with genuine interest. Beside him, Roger Martin seemed torn between irritation at the unexpected turn and recognition that they were witnessing a powerful television moment. "She just secured more concrete commitments than all the others combined," Thomas murmured. "Beginner's luck," Roger retorted. "Tomorrow no one will remember this." But Roger was wrong. The next morning, major newspapers and news portals highlighted Caroline's presentation. Social media buzzed with debates about privilege, social visibility, and the effectiveness of large charity events. The hashtag, her real visibility, became a national trending topic. The other participants reacted differently to the attention Caroline received. Some, like Patricia and Amanda, made no secret of their irritation. Others, like Sophia, the lawyer, and Felicity, the psychologist, showed growing curiosity. Louisa Mason, the doctor, was the only one to approach her directly during breakfast. "Your presentation was impressive," she said, sitting next to Caroline on the veranda. "I mean, we all had elaborate projects, videos, spreadsheets, and you just spoke from the heart. When you have nothing to lose, the truth becomes your only resource," Caroline replied. The impact of the first challenge set the tone for the following days. The dynamic among the participants began to crystallize. A group led by Patricia and Amanda, clearly hostile to Caroline, another more neutral, which included Louisa, Danielle, and Sophia, and a third group that observed from afar, still deciding how to position themselves. Thomas, meanwhile, began individual conversations. Following alphabetical order, Amanda Fisher was the first to be called to his private room. She returned 2 hours later with a satisfied smile that sparked immediate speculation among the others. Meanwhile, backstage, an emergency meeting was called. The first week's ratings had exceeded all expectations, but the reason was not what the producers had planned. The public was watching not for the glamour or potential romance, but for the unexpected social dynamic introduced by Caroline. "We need to regain control of the narrative," Roger insisted. "This wasn't supposed to be a show about social inequality." "But that's what's getting ratings," argued Claudia Foster, the content director. "People are engaged, discussing, taking sides." The final decision was to intensify the romantic challenges and reduce Caroline's screen time, something that would prove more difficult than they imagined. The next morning, Mary Stone gathered everyone in the main living room to announce the next challenge, a fashion magazine photo shoot with the theme The Contemporary Woman. Each participant would have to create her own concept, choose an outfit, and pose for a renowned photographer. "The photos will be published in the next edition of Vogue UK," Mary announced, "and readers will vote on the image that best represents the modern British woman." When the cameras temporarily turned off for challenge preparation, Patricia Vance approached Caroline with a fake smile. "I think you're going to need help with this," she said, looking Caroline's simple clothes up and down. "Fortunately for you, I brought a personal stylist. I can lend him for a price." "And what would that price be?" Caroline asked, holding her gaze. "Just a few minutes of your touching story," Patricia replied, sarcasm evident in her voice. "We're all curious to know what you're really doing here." Caroline smiled slightly. "I appreciate the offer, but I prefer to create my own path." As the day of the photo shoot approached, the atmosphere in the mansion grew increasingly tense. What none of the participants knew was that this seemingly simple challenge would trigger a series of events that would change the course of the program and their lives in ways no one could predict. The day of the photo shoot dawned sunny at Grandview Estate. An improvised studio had been set up in the main garden, with the lake as a natural backdrop. The guest photographer was Richard Davies, a renowned name who had shot for major fashion magazines worldwide. Each participant had an hour for their shoot, with access to a full team of makeup artists, hairstylists, and stylists. The order was determined by lottery, and Caroline got the midday slot, the most challenging light, as some participants pointed out with malicious smiles. The first to pose were Patricia and Amanda, who arrived at the studio carrying several options of clothes and accessories from major brands. Their shoots unfolded like well-rehearsed performances, studied poses, calculated expressions, concepts clearly inspired by the latest international trends. The contemporary woman is global and digital, Patricia explained to the cameras, posing with a tablet in one hand and a smartphone in the other, wearing a futuristic outfit from an Italian brand. She exists simultaneously in the real and virtual worlds. Louisa Mason, the doctor, opted for a different path. Dressed in her white lab coat over a simple dress, she posed with medical instruments and books. The contemporary woman is one who breaks barriers in traditionally male environments, she said, who uses knowledge to transform realities. As the morning progressed, each participant presented her vision of the contemporary woman. Felicity as the professional balancing career and personal life, Danielle as the woman who transforms tradition into innovation, Sophia as the advocate for social causes who uses her voice to promote change. When noon arrived, Caroline's scheduled time, a small crowd had already gathered to watch the shoots, production team, the other participants, and even some estate staff. Caroline appeared wearing the same simple dress she had worn to the charity dinner. She hadn't changed clothes, hadn't gone through the makeup team, carried no accessories. "Aren't you going to get ready?" asked Richard, the photographer, visibly confused. "I am ready," Caroline replied with serenity. A murmur ran through the small audience. Patricia gave a disdainful little laugh. "This is a shoot for Vogue, darling, not for an ID card." Caroline didn't respond. Instead, she walked to the edge of the lake, her back to the camera, and simply stood there, contemplating the water. Richard, initially disconcerted, began to photograph her anyway. After a few minutes, he asked her to turn around. "Can you tell me about your concept?" he asked, adjusting his camera. "The contemporary woman is one who exists beyond filters and expectations," Caroline said, looking directly into the lens, "who doesn't need external validation to affirm her worth. Her natural posture, her direct gaze, and the simplicity of her presentation created such a striking contrast with the previous shoots that even the most skeptical fell silent." "Amazing," Richard murmured after a few clicks. "You have a presence that many professional models would dream of possessing." Caroline's shoot lasted only 20 minutes, much less than the other participants. When it finished, she thanked the team and began to walk away. "Wait," Richard called out. "Don't you want to see the photos?" "I trust your eye," she replied. As Caroline walked away, Thomas Miller, who had discreetly observed each participant's shoot, followed her. "Your concept was the most honest of all," he said, catching up to her near a small bridge over the lake. Caroline turned, surprised by his presence. "I didn't have much time to plan. I just followed my instinct." "That's exactly what makes your participation so valuable," Thomas replied. "While all the others are playing roles, you're just being." "That bothers them," Caroline observed. "And you?" "Their discomfort." "No. My presence here is temporary. When all this is over, they'll go back to their privileged lives and I to my reality. The difference is that maybe, just maybe, some people will start to see beyond appearances." Thomas observed her with genuine interest. "Don't you fear public judgment? Cameras are everywhere." "When you've already been judged and unfairly condemned, as I have, the gaze of others loses much of its power," Caroline replied with a slight smile. "Besides, I don't have social media to check." The conversation was interrupted by Mary Stone, who approached with a professional smile. "Thomas, we need you for the next activity." Before walking away, Thomas looked at Caroline one last time. "I'd like to talk more, officially." "Tonight?" Caroline nodded. "I'll be in the same place tomorrow and the day after. I have no other commitments." The next activity was a group therapy session led by a team of renowned psychologists. The participants were gathered in a circle in the winter garden, with Thomas observing from a distance. The proposed theme was social masks and authenticity, a choice many suspected was influenced by the growing narrative surrounding Caroline. "We all wear masks in different social situations," the lead psychologist began. "The question is, to what extent do these masks protect us or imprison us?" Each participant was invited to talk about moments when they felt they were playing a role instead of being authentic. Felicity Taylor, the participating psychologist, spoke eloquently about the professional challenges of maintaining a public image as an expert while dealing with her own insecurities. Sophia Aldridge, the lawyer, shared how she had to adopt a more aggressive persona in court, contrary to her conciliatory nature. When it was Caroline's turn, all eyes turned to her. "I've lived on both sides," she said calmly. "When I ran my organization, I wore social masks like everyone else, that of a competent director, an inspiring leader, a person always in control. When I lost everything, those masks were violently ripped off. On the streets, you are reduced to your essence. There's no way to keep up appearances when you're sleeping on a pavement." The silence that followed was heavy. Some participants seemed genuinely touched, others visibly uncomfortable. "And now," asked the psychologist, "in this program, with cameras following every move, do you feel authentic, or are you playing a role?" Caroline smiled. "Perhaps the most important question is, who here isn't playing a role?" The session ended with this reflection hanging in the air. Backstage, the producers celebrated the first. Audience data indicated a peak during Caroline's speech. "She may not be what we planned, but she's delivering quality content," admitted Roger Martin, the network director, during an emergency meeting. "The public is engaged, discussing, taking sides. Exactly what we want." "But she's stealing the spotlight from the romantic format," argued one of the producers. "People are more interested in her story than in Thomas's selection process." "Then let's use that," proposed Claudia Foster, the content director. "Let's deepen her story, but always maintain the tension. Will Thomas fall in love with someone so different from his world?" The EWA decision was made. From that moment on, the program's main narrative would be the contrast between Caroline and the other participants, with Thomas at the center of this dichotomy. That night, as promised, Caroline was called to Thomas's private room. The other participants watched her departure with expressions ranging from curiosity to indignation. "She didn't even get dressed up," Amanda Fisher commented disdainfully. "She's going to meet one of the richest men in the country, wearing that." Thomas's room occupied the entire east wing of the top floor. More than a bedroom, it was a complete suite with an office, living room, and a balcony offering a panoramic view of the property. Caroline was led to the balcony, where Thomas awaited her, seated in an armchair, wearing jeans and a simple T-shirt, a very different look from the impeccable suits he wore at the program's official events. "Thank you for coming," he said, indicating the armchair opposite his. "I know these formal conversations aren't your favorite activity." "Depends on the topic," she replied, sitting down. Thomas observed her for a few moments before speaking. "You intrigue me, Caroline. All the others are here for obvious reasons. Fame, money, status, perhaps even the real possibility of a relationship. But you say you don't want any of that. And is that hard to believe?" "It's hard to understand," he corrected. "What do you expect to gain from all this?" Caroline looked at the view from the balcony before answering. "Visibility. Not for me, but for the reality I represent. For the people who, like me, have become invisible. You could have sought that visibility in other ways. Why a reality show?" "Because here is the perfect contrast," Caroline explained. "The difference between your world and mine would never be so evident in another context." Thomas leaned forward, visibly interested. "And what do you think of my world?" "Limited," Caroline replied directly. "You live in bubbles of privilege so hermetically sealed that you don't even realize how disconnected you are from the reality of most people. Instead of being offended, Thomas smiled. "I knew you'd be the only one to tell me the truth without filters." The conversation continued for hours. Thomas spoke about his privileged childhood, the pressure to take over the family business, his decision to forge his own path in the world of technology. Caroline spoke about how she came to work with vulnerable people, the challenges of mobilizing resources for social causes, the pain of seeing her work destroyed by greed and betrayal. "Did you never think about starting over?" Thomas asked. "Every day," Caroline admitted. "But when you lose everything, reputation, contacts, credibility, doors close, and the depression that came after, well, it has ways of convincing you that you don't deserve a second chance. And now? This could be your second chance." Caroline studied him for a moment. "Are you suggesting I use this program as a platform to rebuild my life?" I'm suggesting you might deserve more than you think." When the conversation finally ended, it was past midnight. The cameras, which had captured every word, every gesture, every look, continued filming as Thomas escorted Caroline to the door. "Thank you for the conversation," she said. "Thank you for the honesty," he replied. The next day, excerpts from Caroline and Thomas's conversation were shown on the live program. Ratings soared. On social media, the hashtag #JohnTeamCaroline became a national trending topic, with thousands of people expressing support for the unlikely candidate. However, not all reactions were positive. Gossip blogs began to question Caroline's past. Was her story true? Had she really run a social organization? Why were there no easily accessible records? In the mansion, the atmosphere also changed. The group led by Patricia and Amanda intensified their hostility, now that Caroline clearly gained the attention not only of the public, but also of Thomas. "She's manipulating everyone," Patricia declared during a conversation in the room, carefully positioned to be picked up by the microphones. "This woman from the streets with a pure heart story is obviously a strategy." "We need to expose who she really is," Amanda agreed. Other participants, like Louisa and Sophia, began to approach Caroline, intrigued by her story and unique perspective. During meals, two distinct groups formed, with some floating between them. The next activity was announced, a charity gala ball, with the presence of celebrities and business leaders, broadcast live across the country. Each participant would have the opportunity to dance with Thomas and interact with the guests. "This is going to be interesting," Felicity Taylor commented, observing Caroline's reaction to the announcement. "Have you participated in events like this before, Caroline?" "Yes, but usually serving the drinks, not as a guest," Caroline replied with an ironic smile. On the day of the ball, the mansion transformed. Decorators, florists, and technicians worked all day to convert the main ballroom into a space worthy of the most elegant European parties. The participants spent hours preparing with professional stylists, makeup artists, and hairstylists. Caroline, as always, opted for simplicity. She accepted the help of a makeup artist who applied light makeup and a hairstylist who arranged her hair in a simple bun. For her outfit, she refused the designer dresses offered by the production and opted for a navy blue dress borrowed from Louisa, elegant but discreet. When the ball began, the cameras captured every movement, every interaction. The participants circulated through the ballroom, chatting with guests, displaying rehearsed smiles and studied poses for official photographs. Caroline remained more reserved, observing the scene from a corner of the ballroom. It was there that Thomas found her, wearing a traditional tuxedo that contrasted with his relaxed posture. "Aren't you joining the party?" he asked, offering her a glass of champagne. "I'm observing," Caroline replied, accepting the drink. "There's much to learn just by watching." "Like what?" "How people change their behavior depending on who they're talking to. How power and status shape interactions. How some smiles never reach the eyes." Thomas smiled. "Do you always observe people like that?" When you live on the streets, observing becomes a survival tool, Caroline explained. You learn to read people quickly, who poses a danger, who might offer help, who will pretend you're invisible. At that moment, the orchestra began to play a waltz. Thomas extended his hand to Caroline. "Dance with me?" Caroline hesitated. "I don't know how to waltz." "I'll guide you." Under the gaze of everyone present, some curious, others clearly disapproving, Thomas led Caroline to the center of the dance floor. With patience and delicacy, he guided her through the basic waltz steps, maintaining a light conversation to help her relax. "Everyone is watching," Caroline murmured, feeling uncomfortable under so many eyes. "Let them watch," Thomas replied. "Sometimes being seen is the first step to being understood." That dance, broadcast live to millions across Britain, instantly became one of the program's most commented moments. The image of the billionaire dancing with the homeless woman, both smiling with apparent genuine connection, provoked intense reactions throughout the country. What no one knew, not even Caroline, was that behind the scenes, a storm was brewing. Amanda Fisher, determined to unmask her rival, had hired a private investigator to dig into Caroline's past. And what he had found was about to change everything. The morning after the ball dawned with a heavy atmosphere in the mansion. Breakfast, usually a time of lively conversation and speculation about the day's activities, passed in a strange silence, interrupted only by superficial comments about the previous night's event. Caroline noticed the glances, the whispers, the way some participants quickly averted their eyes when she approached. Something had changed. While having her coffee on the veranda, she was approached by Louisa Mason, the doctor who had gradually become her ally. "You need to know something," Louisa said in a low voice, sitting beside her. "Amanda hired someone to investigate your past. She was showing photos and documents to some people last night after you left." Caroline remained calm, but her gaze betrayed her concern. "What kind of photos?" "I'm not sure. I only heard fragments of conversation. Something about the real Caroline." Louisa hesitated. "Do you have something to hide?" "We all do," Caroline replied after a moment. "The difference is that some people have the resources to hide their secrets better." Before they could continue their conversation, Mary Stone entered the dining room, followed by a small production team. Her serious expression contrasted with her usual professional smile. "Good morning, everyone," she announced. "There's been a change in today's schedule. Thomas requested a day to resolve urgent personal matters, so he will not participate in the activities." A murmur of disappointment ran through the group. "Instead," Mary continued, "we will have a special activity, an individual therapy session with Dr. Helen Parker, a psychologist specializing in trauma and identity reconstruction." The announcement was met with mixed reactions. Some participants seemed genuinely interested, others visibly uncomfortable with the prospect of exposing vulnerabilities in front of the cameras. "Caroline," Mary called, "you'll be first. Dr. Parker awaits you in the music room in 15 minutes. When Mary and her team left, Amanda Fisher approached Caroline with a malicious smile. "I think you have a lot to discuss with the doctor," she said, low enough for only Caroline to hear. "Perhaps about how your social organization was shut down not by betrayal but by tax fraud, or about how you never really lived. On the streets, just pretended to create a media persona." Caroline held her gaze without showing emotion. "You know nothing about me or my story." "I know enough," Amanda retorted, "and soon everyone will." Caroline headed to the music room with a turbulent mind. She didn't fear the truth. She had been honest about her past, but she knew how half-truths and insinuations could distort reality, especially when manipulated by someone with resources and motivation to destroy her. Dr. Helen Parker, a middle-aged woman with a compassionate gaze and professional demeanor, waited seated in an armchair near the grand piano that dominated the room. Cameras had been discreetly positioned to capture the session from multiple angles. "Hello, Caroline," the psychologist greeted with a gentle smile. "Feel free to sit wherever you prefer." Caroline chose a simple wooden chair instead of the comfortable armchair available, a detail that did not go unnoticed by the therapist. Before we begin, I'd like to clarify that, although this session is being filmed, our objective here is therapeutic, not just televisual, Dr. Parker explained. Do you feel comfortable proceeding under these conditions? Caroline nodded. I have nothing to hide. Excellent. I'd like to start by talking about how you feel participating in this program. It's an unusual situation for anyone, but especially considering your background. Caroline reflected before answering. It's like living in two worlds simultaneously. A world of abundance and privilege, where concerns like what to wear or what strategy to adopt to impress a man are treated with the gravity of life or death decisions. And another world, the real one, at least for me, where people struggle daily for basic necessities, invisible to most of those here. The conversation flowed naturally to Caroline's past. Calmly and without dramatization, she recounted how she founded Project Rebirth at 28 after working as a social worker in public shelters and realizing the inefficiency of the system. We started small with a rented space in East London. We offered not just temporary shelter for homeless youth, but a structured reintegration program, basic education, vocational training, psychological support, legal assistance to obtain documents. And how did you fund yourselves? The therapist asked. Initially, with my inheritance, a small amount I received when my parents passed away. Then, with donations from small local businesses, some public grants, community charity events. As Caroline told her story, her voice gained strength and conviction. She spoke about the project's early years of success, the young people they managed to reintegrate into society, the partnerships established with companies for first job programs. In 2019, we were at our peak. We served about 100 young people simultaneously. We had a team of 30 professionals, many volunteers. That's when Richard Morton joined us as financial director. Her expression subtly changed when she mentioned the name. Richard was charismatic, articulate, seemed genuinely committed to the cause. He brought new ideas, new contacts, opened doors for larger funding. In a few months, he became indispensable. Carolyn then recounted how, after a year of collaboration, she discovered irregularities in the organization's accounts. Large sums had been embezzled, documents had been forged, financial reports manipulated. When I confronted Richard, he had already prepared the ground. He presented to the board members evidence that I had authorized the embezzlements, that I was using the organization as a front for personal enrichment. Caroline's voice trembled slightly for the first time since she began her account. The board, composed mainly of people who had known Richard longer than me, believed him. I was removed from the organization I created. A month later, an external audit was requested by the funders. When the fraud came to light, Richard had already disappeared with much of the money. But the damage was done. The project's reputation was destroyed, funders withdrew their support, employees sought other jobs. And were you formally accused? Dr. Parker asked. No, the official investigation eventually proved my innocence. But that took almost 2 years, during which my name was associated with fraud in all the social and professional circles I frequented. No one wanted to hire the director who let an NGO go bankrupt. My contacts distanced themselves. My friends disappeared. Caroline then recounted how depression gradually consumed her. Out of work, she spent her last savings on rent and basic necessities. When the money ran out, she lost her apartment. The first nights on the street were the hardest, not so much because of the physical discomfort, but because of the feeling of invisibility. It's surreal how people look through you, as if you don't exist. And you never sought professional help? Family, friends, social services? Pride, perhaps, Caroline admitted. Or shame. How could someone who dedicated her life to helping vulnerable people admit that she had become one of them? The session continued for almost 2 hours. Caroline spoke about her adaptation to life on the streets, the small occasional jobs she got to buy food, the public libraries where she spent hours reading to maintain her sanity, the shelters she avoided because she knew their limitations. At the end, Dr. Parker asked a question that caught Caroline by surprise. If you could go back in time, would you do it all again? Would you found the project? Trust Richard? Face all these losses? Caroline reflected for a long moment. Yes, she finally replied. Because despite everything I lost, the project helped hundreds of young people during its existence. And because losing everything taught me that our humanity does not reside in what we possess, but in what we are capable of giving. When the session ended, Caroline felt strangely light, as if a weight had been removed from her shoulders. There were no more secrets to be revealed, no shadow that could be used against her. Upon leaving the music room, she found the mansion strangely empty. Most of the participants had retreated to their rooms or scattered around the property. Only Louisa waited in the corridor with a worried expression. "Are you okay?" she asked, approaching. "Better than I expected," Caroline replied with a small smile. "Amanda spent the whole morning on the phone," Louisa informed in a low voice. "I overheard fragments of conversation, something about releasing it to the press tomorrow morning." Caroline nodded, maintaining her calm. "Thank you for letting me know." Instead of returning to the shared room, Caroline headed to the gardens. She needed air, space, time to process what was to come. She walked to the lake and sat on the small bridge where she had talked with Thomas days before. The afternoon slowly advanced. The sun began to set when Caroline noticed that she hadn't seen any production members for hours. Unusual, as cameras normally followed her everywhere, the feeling that something strange was happening intensified. Deciding to return to the mansion, Caroline stood up and turned, only to find Thomas Miller standing a few feet away, observing her. "How long have you been there?" she asked, surprised. "A few minutes," he replied, approaching. "I didn't want to interrupt your thoughts." "I thought you were resolving urgent personal matters," Caroline commented, repeating Mary's words, "and I was." Thomas sat on the bridge's railing, indicating the spot beside him. "I watched your session with Dr. Parker." Caroline looked at him in surprise. "You watched?" "Yes. I asked the production to transmit it to me in real time." He hesitated. "I hope you don't mind." "Why would you do that?" "Because Amanda Fisher approached me last night with shocking revelations about your past, as she put it. I wanted to verify the facts before drawing conclusions." Caroline felt a wave of apprehension. "And what did she show you?" "Old news reports about the closure of Project Rebirth. A preliminary report that suggested your involvement in the fraud. Photos of you at social events before everything happened, as if that somehow proved you were lying about who you are." "And you believed it?" Thomas looked directly at her. "I believed there was more to the story than she was showing me. That's why I asked for the change in today's schedule and the session with Dr. Parker. I wanted to give you the opportunity to tell your side without pressure or accusations." Caroline looked away towards the lake where the sunset reflected in orange tones. "What does Amanda plan to do with this information?" "She contacted an influential gossip columnist. She plans to release everything tomorrow, probably with a narrative that favors her." "And how will that affect the program?" "To be honest, I don't care about the program right now," Thomas replied with a frankness that surprised Caroline. "I'm more concerned about you, about the impact this exposure will have." Caroline laughed softly, without humor. "I suppose when you've already lost everything, the idea of public exposure loses some of its terrifying power. Even so, you don't deserve to go through this. I can intervene, prevent the publication." "No," Caroline interrupted firmly. "I don't want special treatment. If it comes out, I'll face the consequences." Thomas observed her with an admiration he didn't try to hide. "You are the most authentic person I have ever met." That night, Caroline couldn't sleep. Sitting on the mansion's veranda while the other participants slept, She mentally revisited every moment of the past 6 years, the rise and fall of Project Rebirth, the months of depression, the adaptation to life on the streets, the impulsive decision to crash the program's launch event, the weeks in the mansion. When the sun began to rise, Carolyn made a decision. She wrote a brief letter, left it on her maid bed, picked up her canvas bag, and quietly left the mansion. No one saw her leave. Carolyn's disappearance was discovered 2 hours later when the participants began to wake up. The letter on her bed was addressed to Thomas. "Thank you for the opportunity given to me. Whatever happens from now on, know that these weeks have shown me that there is still humanity in unexpected places. I need some time to breathe and reflect. Don't look for me. I will find my own way, as I always have." News of the disappearance spread quickly. Production panicked. Search teams were organized to scour the property and its surroundings. Roger Martin, the network director, called an emergency meeting with Thomas. "This is a disaster," Roger exclaimed, pacing back and forth in his improvised office. "We need to find her immediately." "She doesn't want to be found," Thomas replied calmly, "and we have to respect that." "Respect? We have contracts, schedules, sponsors. The public is invested in her story. Your story with her. We can't just—" "Actually, we can," Thomas interrupted. "We'll make a statement. Carolyn had to step away for personal reasons. The program continues with the 10 original participants. What if the press finds out she ran away? What if the revelations Amanda plans to release are linked to her disappearance?" Thomas reflected for a moment. "Then we'll be honest. We'll say she chose to step away to process what's happening. We'll show her dignity, not her flight." Meanwhile, on social media, Caroline's absence from the morning's live broadcasts was already sparking speculation. Hashtags like Millionaire, "Where is Caroline?" and .comeback Caroline quickly gained traction. Amanda Fisher, seeing her opportunity to eliminate her rival, crumble, tried to contact the columnist to accelerate the release of the revelations. To her surprise, the columnist informed her that she would not publish the story. Someone with more influence had requested that the story be shelved. That someone was Thomas Miller. The program's activities continued in a strange atmosphere in the following days. Caroline's absence was like a ghost hovering over the mansion. Some participants, like Louisa and Sophia, showed genuine concern. Others, like Patricia and Amanda, barely concealed their relief. Thomas, for his part, seemed distant and thoughtful. He participated in the scheduled activities, but without the same engagement as before. His individual conversations with the participants became shorter, more formal. On the 4th day after the disappearance, during a cooking challenge, Mary Stone was urgently called by a producer. Minutes later, she returned with a smile she couldn't hide her excitement. "Ladies," she announced, "I have news. Caroline Lane has been located." A murmur ran through the group. "Where is she?" Louisa asked immediately. "Is she okay?" Sophia added. "She's fine," Mary assured, and she requested to return to the program. Thomas, who was observing the scene from a corner of the kitchen, couldn't hide his surprise and his relief. "When is she coming back?" he asked, approaching. "Tomorrow morning," Mary replied, "and there's something else. She asked to make a public statement as soon as she returns, live." That night, the tension in the mansion was palpable. The participants speculated about the reasons for Caroline's departure and return. Theories circulated. She had been pressured by producers to create television drama. She had discovered compromising information about other participants. She had done all this to gain more visibility. The truth, as always, was simpler and more complex at the same time. Caroline had spent the last 4 days in the community near Grandview Estate, staying at the home of a family who welcomed her without asking questions. There, away from the cameras and the artificial environment of the mansion, she found space to reflect on her journey and decide her next steps. The The next morning, when the production helicopter landed on the mansion's helipad, all the participants and staff awaited at the main entrance. Thomas was positioned at the front, visibly anxious. Caroline descended from the helicopter with firm steps. She wore the same simple clothes as always, but there was something different about her, a renewed determination, a clarity of purpose that was almost tangible. Seeing her approach, Thomas couldn't help but smile genuinely. "Welcome back," he said. Caroline returned the smile. "Thank you for respecting my choice." "I will always respect your choices," he replied in a low voice, "even when I don't fully understand them." The glances they exchanged at that moment spoke more than any words could express. Something had changed between them during the separation, a mutual recognition that transcended the program's context. "I'm ready for my live statement," Caroline announced, turning to Mary and the production team, "if it's still possible." "Everything is prepared," Mary confirmed. "In an hour, we'll be on air." As she was led away for preparations, Carolyn noticed the looks from the other participants, some warm, others wary, others clearly hostile. Amanda Fisher watched her from afar, her gaze revealing frustration and confusion. The stage was set for the declaration that would change not only the course of the program, but the lives of everyone involved in ways no one could predict. The mansion's main ballroom had been transformed into an improvised television studio. Powerful lights, strategically positioned cameras, a small audience formed by the production team and the other participants. In the center, two elegant sofas, one for Mary Stone, the presenter, the other for Caroline. Backstage, producers and Star TV executives debated heatedly. No one knew exactly what Caroline intended to say, and this made them nervous. Attempts to extract information from her or suggest a script were politely but firmly refused. "If she says anything that harms the program's image or the sponsors, we cut the signal," Roger Martin instructed the technical director. "We have a 30-second delay precisely for such situations." At 10 o'clock in the morning, prime time for a Sunday morning show, the cameras began broadcasting live nationwide. Mary Stone, professional as always, introduced the segment with her usual dramatic flair. "Good morning, Britain. We are here, live from Grandview Estate, for a very special moment on The Chosen One." As many of you have noticed, Caroline Lane, our most controversial participant, has been absent for the past few days. Today, she returns and wishes to make a public statement. Caroline, Britain is eager to hear what you have to say. Caroline sat upright on the sofa, her hands calmly resting on her lap. She wore simple jeans and a white blouse, a remarkably sober look compared to Mary's elaborate outfit. Her eyes, however, conveyed an intensity that captured attention. "Thank you, Mary," she began in a calm and clear voice. "And thank you to everyone who has accompanied me on this unexpected journey. For the past 4 days, I've been away to reflect on my purpose here and on recent attempts to expose fragments of my past as a way to discredit me." The cameras captured Amanda Fisher's expression, who shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "I didn't come to refute accusations or defend myself. The truth about my story, the work I did, the mistakes I made, the losses I suffered, remains the same, regardless of how someone tries to distort it. What changed was my understanding of why I am here." Caroline paused briefly, her gaze sweeping over the other participants before turning directly to the main camera. "When I entered this program, I said I just wanted to be seen as a human being, not as a statistic. But I realized my motivation was more complex. Part of me sought validation, recognition, perhaps even revenge against a system that discarded me when I most needed support. Another part sought redemption, to prove to myself and to others that my worth had not been destroyed, along with my career and my financial situation." Her voice gained strength as she continued, "In the days I spent away, staying with a humble family in the neighboring community, I understood something fundamental. We don't need a stage, cameras, or the approval of powerful people to have value. Our humanity exists regardless of whether we are seen or recognized. The silence in the studio was absolute. Even the most skeptical production members seemed absorbed in her words. I decided to return not to seek a second chance or a fairy tale happy ending, but to conclude what I started, and more importantly, to propose something to Thomas Miller and the production of this program. At that moment, Carolyn looked directly at Thomas, who was watching the broadcast standing near the cameras. Thomas, in recent months you have allocated millions to create this spectacle, which, in its essence, transformed human feelings into entertainment. I'm not here to judge. All of us, in different ways, are complicit in the system that values spectacle above substance. What I propose is a reflection. What if we used all this reach, all this attention, for something truly transformative? Mary Stone, realizing she had completely lost control of the interview, tried to intervene. "Caroline, this is fascinating, but perhaps we can go back to talking about your absence and—" "My proposal is simple," Caroline continued, gently ignoring the interruption, "to transform The Chosen One into a platform for visibility for real social projects. Each of the 10 original participants has already demonstrated having causes they champion. Instead of competing for a marriage, we could join forces to amplify these causes." Backstage, Roger Martin gestured furiously, considering cutting the transmission. But something stopped him. Perhaps Thomas Miller's expression, who observed Caroline with growing admiration, or perhaps the first engagement data on social media, which showed an explosion of positive reactions to the broadcast. "I'm not suggesting abandoning the romantic format that attracts viewers," Caroline clarified, demonstrating a surprising understanding of television logic. "I'm proposing to elevate it to something more meaningful, a program where love is not just between two people, but extends to the community, to social causes, to people who normally remain invisible to the eye." Cameras. Mary Stone, partially regaining her professional composure, saw an opportunity to regain control. "This is very inspiring, Caroline, but we are in the middle of an established format, with contracts, sponsors, audience expectations." "Formats evolve," Caroline replied serenely, "and I believe the British public is ready for something deeper than just watching women compete for a rich man's attention." The camera captured a discreet smile on Thomas's lips. "Of course," Caroline added with a slight smile, "the final decision rests with Thomas and the network. I merely offer my vision and my willingness to continue under new conditions." Mary, an experienced professional, recognized the cue to involve Thomas in the conversation. "Thomas, would you like to comment on Caroline's proposal?" All eyes turned to the billionaire, who slowly walked to the center of the improvised studio. For a moment, he just looked at Caroline, as if seeing her for the first time. "When I conceived this program," he began, "I was looking for something I couldn't name. I called it a social experiment. But perhaps I was just seeking authenticity in a world where everything seems calculated and performative." He paused. "Caroline brought more authenticity than I ever expected to find." A murmur ran through the small audience. "Your proposal is bold," Thomas continued, "revolutionary, in fact, and absolutely aligned with what I've discovered truly matters to me." Roger Martin approached, visibly nervous. "Thomas, we need to discuss this offline before any decision—" "Actually," Thomas interrupted, with gentle firmness, "the decision has already been made." He turned to Caroline. "I accept your proposal. As of today, The Chosen One transforms. We will maintain the romantic element. After all, I cannot deny that I feel genuinely attracted to several of the participants." He smiled. "But the main focus will be the social impact we can create together." Caroline's expression lit up with a mixture of surprise and genuine joy, perhaps the most authentic emotion ever captured on the program. To begin, Thomas continued, now addressing the cameras directly, I announce that each of the 10 original participants will receive £1 million to invest in a social project of their choice. The condition is that they get personally involved in the implementation, not just lend their names. The studio erupted in spontaneous applause. Even Amanda and Patricia, who had been most hostile to Caroline, couldn't hide their surprise, and reluctantly, admiration. As for Caroline, Thomas continued, turning to her, I propose something different. Instead of $1 million, I offer partnership. I would like to recreate Project Rebirth on a national scale, with you in leadership and the financial and strategic support of the Miller Foundation. Caroline's eyes welled up, the first time she had shown such open vulnerability since her arrival on the program. I'm not buying your affection, Thomas clarified. I'm investing in your vision, your experience, and your integrity. The personal aspect of our relationship, well, that's something we can explore off-camera, in our own time. Mary Stone, recognizing a historic television moment, tried to articulate a fitting conclusion. Britain, we are witnessing an unprecedented transformation. The chosen one has just reinvented itself before our eyes. In the coming weeks, we will follow this new journey where love and social impact will walk hand in hand. Backstage, Roger Martin and the network executives oscillated between panic at the disruption of the planned format and excitement at the first data coming in. Social media exploded with reactions. Viewership reached historic peaks. Hashtags like Class the New Chosen, One and Box TV Revolution dominated trends. The following weeks unfolded at an intense pace. The program maintained the reality show format, with participants living together in the mansion, but the activities were completely reformulated. Instead of challenges to impress Thomas, they worked on collaborative social projects, visited communities, discussed public policies with experts. Carolyn and Thomas developed an increasingly evident closeness, but maintained a tacit agreement to explore their relationship away from the cameras. The public, surprisingly, respected this choice, perhaps finally recognizing that not all aspects of human life need to be turned into a spectacle. As the program's finale approached, the dynamic among the participants had changed dramatically. Old rivalries gave way to unexpected collaborations. Amanda Fisher, the former model who had tried to discredit Caroline, found herself passionate about professional training projects for vulnerable women. Patricia Vance, the digital influencer, redirected her platform to amplify voices normally ignored by traditional media. Louisa Mason, who had shown empathy for Carolyn from the beginning, announced during a live broadcast that after the program, she would dedicate 1 day a week to free medical care in underprivileged communities, a decision that inspired other health professionals across the country. On the night of the grand finale, all of Britain watched expectantly. The format had been altered. Instead of Thomas choosing one of the women as his wife, each participant would present the initial impact of her social project and her plans for the future. The stage set in the mansion's garden was decorated not with the usual symbols of romance and luxury, but with images of the projects carried out over the 3 months. The audience included not only celebrities and business leaders, but representatives from the impacted communities. One by one, the participants presented their projects. Some had discovered genuine vocations for social work, others clearly saw the initiative as an image opportunity, but still generated positive impact. When all the presentations were finished, Mary Stone called Thomas to the center of the stage. The moment everyone has been waiting for has arrived, she announced with her usual dramatic flair. Thomas Miller will reveal his final choice. Thomas smiled, taking the microphone. When I began this journey, I was looking for a wife. What I found was much more valuable, an opportunity for personal and collective transformation. He paused, looking at the participants. All of you taught me something important. All of you grew over these months, and I am grateful to have been part of that growth. The tension was palpable. Even with the new format, the romantic aspect had never been completely abandoned, and the public still expected a decision. However, Thomas continued, if there's one thing I learned from Caroline, it's that the most important choices in life should not be made under spotlights or external pressure. He walked towards Caroline, who watched with a serene expression. Caroline taught me to see beyond appearances, to seek substance instead of spectacle. And more importantly, she showed me that a person's true worth is not in what they possess, but in what they are capable of giving. He smiled, looking into her eyes. Therefore, my decision is not to make a public decision today. A murmur of surprise ran through the audience. Instead, I propose something different. Let's end this program not with a choice, but with a collective commitment. The $10 million initially allocated to the Chosen One prize will be equally distributed among the projects presented today, and the Miller Foundation commits to monitor and support each of them for the next 5 years. The applause was deafening. The participants, even those who secretly hoped to be the chosen one, couldn't help but acknowledge the beauty and integrity of the gesture. As for the personal aspect, Thomas concluded, looking meaningfully at Caroline, I prefer it to evolve naturally, away from the cameras. What is real doesn't need an audience to exist. The broadcast ended with a scene that would quickly become iconic. Thomas and the 11 women hand in hand, forming a circle, not as competitors or contenders, but as partners in a journey of transformation. In the days that followed, the media buzzed with analyses and speculations about the unusual outcome. Critics called it a marketing ploy, a calculated strategy to boost Thomas Miller's corporate image. Others celebrated what they called a revolution in British entertainment, a moment of rupture with exploitative and superficial formats. The truth, as always, lay somewhere between these extremes. 3 months after the program ended, life had found new rhythms for everyone involved. Most participants continued to develop their social projects, some with genuine commitment, others gradually returning to their original careers, but still linked to the causes they embraced on the program. Carolyn dedicated herself entirely to the reconstruction of Project Rebirth, now on a national scale and with a solid structure. Her story inspired a social reintegration movement for homeless people, with a special focus on professionals who had lost everything due to adverse circumstances. As for Thomas, he gradually stepped away from the direct management of his companies to dedicate himself to the Miller Foundation, working side by side with Caroline on various projects. Their relationship evolved naturally, as they had promised. Without external pressures or artificial expectations, they discovered a connection that transcended the stereotypes of billionaire and homeless woman that initially defined their interaction. On an autumn afternoon, almost a year after the program ended, Caroline visited one of the new Project Rebirth units on the outskirts of London. As she chatted with the young residents, she noticed Thomas observing her from across the room, with a smile she knew well, a mixture of admiration and something deeper, more personal. Later, walking together through the neighborhood, Thomas discreetly held her hand. Did you know today marks exactly 1 year since you crashed the program's launch? He commented. Caroline smiled, surprised he had remembered the date. A year since you broke your own rules and let me stay. Best decision I ever made, Thomas replied. He hesitated, then continued, I've been thinking, maybe it's time to make public what we've known for months. Caroline stopped, turning to face him. Are you sure? Once we announce it, the media won't leave us alone. Everything will come back. The speculations, the cameras, the sensational stories. I don't care, Thomas said with conviction. I no longer want to live behind the scenes of my own life. I want to be able to hold your hand in public, introduce you as my partner, build something together for all to see. Caroline observed him for a long moment. The man in front of her had changed profoundly since their first meeting. less concerned with appearances, more connected with genuine purposes, more willing to be vulnerable. "Perhaps you're right," she finally conceded. "Perhaps it's time to show that real stories can be more powerful than the fairy tales they sell us." 2 weeks later, a simple photograph appeared on Thomas Miller's social media, the first personal post on his normally corporate profile. He and Carolyn sitting on the small bridge over the lake at Grandview Estate, smiling with the naturalness of those who truly feel at home in each other's presence. The Yasema caption simply read, "Some choices don't need spotlights to be right." The post instantly went viral. Journalists tried to make contact, speculations resurfaced, former program participants were sought for comments. This time, however, neither Thomas nor Caroline hid or explained themselves. They continued with their work, their projects, their relationship, not as characters in a media narrative, but as two people who found something rare in an improbable context, the opportunity to see and be seen beyond appearances. 6 months later, they married in an intimate ceremony in the same community that had welcomed Caroline during her brief escape from the program. There was no television broadcast, no exclusivity contracts, no grand spectacles. Just people who meant something real in their lives, celebrating a union that challenged not only social prejudices, but the very logic of the entertainment world. The man who once wanted to choose a wife from 10 carefully selected candidates ended up finding genuine love in the person who least fit his original criteria. The woman who lost everything, including faith in second chances, rediscovered her capacity to trust and love without giving up her essence or her principles. And Britain, which watched it all as entertainment, perhaps learned that the most powerful stories are not those meticulously scripted to provoke emotions, but those that emerge from the courage to be authentic in a world that values appearances more than substance. Dear listeners, we hope Caroline and Thomas's story has touched your hearts. To continue this journey of narratives exploring human complexities and social transformations, we have prepared a special playlist with equally engaging stories. Find it here by clicking on the left. If you like this story, be sure to subscribe to the channel and give the video a like. Daily, we bring content that makes us reflect on values, appearances, and the true essence of what makes us human. Share your impressions in the comments. Do you believe that transformations like Thomas's are possible in real life? We look forward to seeing you in our next content.